Little section of the Gita, chapter 2, text 62. Chapter 2, text 62. The previous verses, Arjuna asked Krishna a question about a self-realized person, a stita pragya muni, a sage whose wisdom is fixed. And he asked 4 questions. Kabhasha, what are the general symptoms of such a person? And then Kim prabhasheta, how does he speak? Kim asita, how does he sit? And brajeta kim, how does he walk? And these questions are not just literal questions. And we know that by Krishna's answer. If the questions had been literal, then Krishna would have said, this is the person's gait, or how many miles he walks a minute, or he sits in a chair, or whatever the case might be. But Krishna's answers to Arjuna's questions demonstrate that the questions were much more figurative and symbolic. Figurative and symbolic. So, Krishna's, at this point, Krishna's more or less answered Arjuna's questions. There's a few ways to take it. One is that he's answered them all 4. The other one is that he's answered 3 of the 4. The last verse we just read said, Yukta asita matpadaha. You sit yoked with me as the highest object. And it was it's a big deal. We dedicated a huge chunk of yesterday's class to last week's class to it, because it's really the introduction of theism into the Gita. Prior to this last verse, the one that we just looked at, Krishna had not made any arguments for theism. But this is the beginning of the theistic slant of the Gita. It's an evolution. Let's get that. Okay. Radhi, can you keep Russ quiet, please? Thank you. So the last verse says that, you can sit with your senses under full control, with me as the highest object, and then you'll become steady in your wisdom. And you get a move from a situation where the senses are strong enough that they can pull you away from self-realization. And so you've got to control them, and it's difficult to control them. You need to get a higher taste. And then that higher taste, Krishna says, is himself. And when you get that higher connection with a higher power, then you're able to withstand natural antagonism that the senses provide. So that's a little bit of a recap. Arjuna, in the middle of the chapter, asked Krishna 4 questions. They were symbolic questions. We know that because Krishna's answer demonstrates that he took them that way. And Arjuna never says, you didn't understand me. So it's just by the flow of the text, you get a sense of what the questions are by the answers. Krishna just finished answering how you sit, and going through a little bit of you can sit and restrain yourself, but just restraining yourself. Sitting means restraining yourself. Just restraining yourself isn't tantamount to self-realization. You can restrain yourself, you can straitjacket yourself and not have achieved self-realization. You're just repressed. But if you get a higher taste, then you can truly be fixed. And that higher taste is Krishna. That's what's just happened. that leaves one last question: is how does he move? How does he move in the world? Brajeta Kim, which hasn't been answered. And so there's sort of two ways to look at this section. One way is that it's going to tell you how not to move in the world. And then afterwards it's going to tell you how to move in the world. And that's a pretty standard formula that you'll find in Vedic texts and really in any rigorous text. You'll do this. Somehow you've opened that door. I don't know why that door is open. It's not meant to be opened. Let's get that fixed up, figured out. There's two ways to look at what we're going to read today. One of them is that Krishna's going to tell us what not to do. And then afterwards he'll tell us what to do. And this is very standard in Vedic texts and Sanskrit texts. You have vidhi, rules, and then nisheda. Vidhi nisheda means prohibitions and rules. What you have to do, and then what you have to not do. You can let them know that's not going to work. The deadlifts thing isn't going to work. Thanks, man. So sometimes you say what you should do first, and you say what you shouldn't do afterwards. We call that rules and regulations. You have yamas and niyamas. Again, the things you don't do and then the things you do. So sometimes you say the negative first and the positive second. Sometimes you say the positive first and negative second. Tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That's the negative. And so it's not just Vedic texts or Sanskrit texts that do this juxtapositioning of what you should do and what you should not do. It's quite commonly done when you're looking at something really comprehensively. And so you'll find this in just any real serious, rigorous treatment of a subject. Your do's and your do-nots, your rules and your regulations, your vidhis and nishedas, your yamas and your niyamas. It's what happens when you really want to give somebody a full look at what's going on. You two are sitting in such a way where I'm looking through this thing to see you. I don't know if you're having the same experience with me, but just move over somewhere, one direction or another. It's a lot more pleasant for me. I want to be able to make eye contact with you, and it's like you're like in a camouflage behind trees or something like that. So I think this introduction will help us to make the most out of this section we're about to look at. So Krishna's either telling us how not to move, and he's going to tell us how to move, or he is continuing his discussion of how you can, because he said you have to control your senses, but you'll still have a taste. But if you get a higher taste, then you'll be okay. But even one of the senses can pull you away. So you've got to sit and control all your senses with me as the highest object. And if you don't do that, here's what's going to happen. So it's either a continuation of how you sit, or it's a beginning exploration of how you move by telling you how not to move. Did you guys follow that? So how you sit is how you don't engage. How you move is how you do engage without getting spun. In many ways, it's the same subject from two different viewpoints. How do I not get entangled in the world? How do I move in the world without getting entangled? So it's really the same question in many ways from two different vantage points. One is, what do I not do? And then the other one is, how do I continue to not do that while I still make my moves in the world? How do I be like a lotus which is in this world, but not of it? How do I move in this world? How do I do my duty without getting attached to the results. And so if you tell somebody how do you sit, or how do you not become attached, okay, but then how do you move? How do you move and make moves and do your duty, but then not automatically, consequently become attached? So this might be a bit much for you guys in terms of an introduction, but I just wanted to be complete myself. And so we've got either one of two things happening. It's really both is happening. Krishna is a sophisticated speaker, and so he's able to smoothly move from one question to another without losing the thread of continuity. Sometimes you build on something which you did, like in wrestling, let's say, for instance. In wrestling, there's different things you do in wrestling, but one of the things you'll do is you need to move your opponent backwards. And then by moving them backwards, essentially by hitting them, usually with a level change, so you're at an equal level, then you drop down suddenly and then launch yourself into the other person's hips. So you're both standing up like this, and maybe you even come together and grab each other's heads and clinch. But then one person will level change, and then they'll just it's a penetration step, and they'll hit the other person in their hips and fold them. You follow this? And when they fold them, then the person's body becomes light because their body is now over your body and you can pick them up. Does that make sense? So now, if you were to break it down, you would say that, it's really, because you're going to drop, you're going to launch, and the person folds, and then you stand up with the person now in your grasp. Those movements all happen continuously. You can break them up into smaller sections to teach them, but the only way you can successfully execute them is as one movement. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. There's feints and all sorts of other stuff. But at some point, you have to commit to dropping your level. Now, if you just drop your level, you've done nothing. And if you drop your level and just hang, the other guy knows you're about to shoot, and he starts to push himself away so he can sprawl and flatten you out. So you ultimately have to drop your level and shoot into him. And if you just drop your level, now there are some wrestlers who will just drop their level and hang out for a minute and tempt you because they look like they're low and they can't do anything, but they got that incredible, like a cobra that coils up and launches itself. And so sometimes they tempt you and they get you to react, and then they still time it, or they get you to come into them thinking you're going to knock them over, and then they cobra into you. But for the most part, you have to level change, penetration step. Pick the person up. 1, 2, 3, one after another. You can break them down and say there's a level change, a penetration step, and then standing up. We really take an angle and turn the corner and stand up. But what actually happens is you have to learn how to put them all together, and you can only execute it successfully when you do it all one thing after another. And there's lots of stuff like that happens in life where you have to have moving parts, and that's when the magic happens. Music. At some point you have to coalesce with a bunch of musicians and jam, and everybody has to just be in the mix together at the same time and evolve together at the same time. You can't just break it down to one beat. You have to put a string of beats together and accomplish them in one fell swoop. Cooking is the same thing. You cook at a restaurant on a grill, and you have to learn how to put multiple orders on the grill at one time, and you have to mind 3, 4, 5 orders at the same time. You don't make one order at a time. It's impossibly slow. You have to make multiple orders at the same time, and you're tending to multiple things at once, and there's a dexterous dance that goes on as you're cooking things. Even just a regular meal, you're steaming this and cooking that, and it all comes together at the end. Philosophically, when you can move from one subject to another where you're not even really changing subjects, you're just evolving the teaching of one subject so it includes another. It's the mark of a serious thinker, a good writer, a good speaker, where one subject leads to another and you never really switch gears, you just evolve, and the steps are seamless. Even in a logical argument, in a syllogism, it's the same way. When you look at fine, well-done things, they always have this smoothness and this elegance to them, where one thing leads to the next, and you're taken on a journey. So although Arjuna asked Krishna, Kim asita, how do they sit? And he asked Arjuna, Brajeta Kim, how do they move? Which would appear to be two separate questions. What we're about to experience is Krishna's seamless transition from question A to question B. How do you sit means how do you not engage. How do you move means how do you engage. But ultimately those two things become one because you're supposed to do your duty but not become attached. You're supposed to be in this world but not of it. Padma Eva, like a lotus. And so what we're going to see here is Krishna's transition. So in one way, he's doing the positive negative. One of the senses can take you can sit and restrain yourself like a tortoise. That's the example he gives. A tortoise pulls its limbs within itself. And he says, but that's not enough, because just restraining your senses won't take away the taste. Rasa api asya. It won't take away your taste. Rasa varjam, except for the taste. Rasa varjam, rasa api asya param drishta nivartate. But if you see something higher, then it'll take away the taste. So you sit like a tortoise, but that's not enough, because you'll still have a taste. But if you see something higher, but even one of the senses can take away. Even one of the senses can take away a vipaschitaha, a learned person, an insightful person can take away your mind. So then what you do, you have to sit with me as the highest object. So he's been just bouncing back and forth. Do this, but don't do this, but do this, but don't do this. He's already doing that, and he's going to continue with that. And he just stayed a positive. Yukta asita matpadaha. Sit with your mind focused on me, and now he's going to tell you what happens if you don't. Simultaneously, he's also beginning to answer the question of how to move in the world. And so both things are happening in this section. He's continuing with his discussion on sitting, and he's also moving into his discussion on moving in the world. Did you follow that? All right, so this section is quite brilliant. And so, dhyayato vishayang pungsa. Dhyayato vishayan pungsa. A person who meditates, dhyayataha, like dhyan, they're meditating on. Vishayan, they're meditating on vishaya. They're meditating on sense objects. Now, we discussed last week what sense objects are, because the term vishaya doesn't really translate to anything in English. It's a technical Sanskrit term. I spent quite a bit of time discussing what it means, but it takes a paragraph. You have senses: taste, sight, touch, smell, and sound. Essentially, they're orifices in your body through which you ingest the material world. You look at something and you ingest it through your eyes, or you hear something through your ears, or taste something through your mouth, or through the pores of your skin, you touch something, or your olfactory sense smells something. You also have orifices by which you put things out into the world. You have your genitals by which you procreate, and you have your rectum through which you expel waste. But through these 5 traditional senses, you're really ingesting the world. You're taking it in and enjoying it. It's how you enjoy the world. And so the Vishayas are the objects, and in this case it means the objects that you want to ingest, the objects that you want to touch, the objects that you want to taste or smell. And they're generally the things that get you in trouble in the material world because you get too enraptured by them and it takes your mind and steals it away from self-realization and from duty and from dispassion, and you become overwhelmed by the material world. So Vishayas, objects, literally the word Vishaya means object. In a philosophical sense, it means sense objects, and it means the things that you get overwhelmed by that take you away from the real task of life. So dhyayato vishayang pungsa. A person meditates on sense objects. Sangha teshu upajayate. And from that, attachment is born. Teshu means in that. Sangha. Sanghas teshu upajayate. Upajayate means it's born. What's born? Sangha. Sangha means attachment. Sometimes we use the word sangha to mean satsanga, which means attachment to sat. Sat means truth, or it means true people, or it means good people, or real activity, spirituality, eternity. So when you're attached to that higher thing, that's a good thing, satsanga. But the word sangha by itself is a negative term. It refers to material attachment. So material attachment, you have to modify it with an adjective to make it good. You follow? The word by itself is bad, sangha. But when you modify it with an adjective, then it can become a good word if the word you modify it with is a good word. But if you say, I just want to get some sangha, that's a bad thing. You don't say that. So I want to get some satsanga. You have to modify, you have to add it. If you don't know, then you'll make a mistake and you might shorten it in a way that's not appropriate. The word sangha occurring on its own is bad. So sangha teshu upajayate. You get attached. Now let's think about it. If you go by a billboard every day and the billboard has, I don't know, a box of cereal and somebody looks like they're really enjoying the cereal, then it's quite possible that you might at some point decide, I want to go try a box of that cereal, right? How do we know that's true? Yeah, because they do marketing studies, and that's the whole point of getting eyes in front of your thing, and that's what makes people click. Why do you think people are spending billions of dollars on getting your eyes in front of stuff? Because it works. Why do they have billboards? Because it works. So if you're meditating on something, which means you're contemplating it, which means you're thinking about it, and why are you thinking about it? Because it's in front of you. Then, in due course of time, you start to get attached to that thing that's in front of you, or you start to feel some feeling for that thing. You want that thing. Does this make sense? This happens in the world. This happens in the world. Like there's a whole workplace romance thing that happens in the world. Why do workplace romances happen? Because you're hanging out with the person for 8 hours a day. You get it? It naturally happens. You might just pass the person by on the street. But if you're hanging out with them for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, things kick off. Things you're around, you get attached to. So you're contemplating things, and then from that contemplation comes attachment. Is this true? That's true. It's true. Modern advertising is built, modern marketing is built on this principle. Sangat, from that Sangha. Sangat means from that Sangha. It's in the ablative case. From that Sangha, sanjayate kama, desire is born. First you get attached to something, then it turns into an actual desire to possess that thing. You decide you want that box of cereal, or you want to date that person. First you're just enjoying their company. Now you actually want to turn the corner and romanticize things. First you're just hanging out with this person every day at work, just seeing that box of cereal on the billboard. But after seeing it for long enough and hanging out with it for long enough, you're like kind of attached. You like look forward to seeing it, kind of look at it, think about what it might taste like. Start developing an attachment for the person. Then eventually it's like you want to ask them out. Or you want to buy the cereal. Go to the store and go to the cereal aisle and pick up a box. You follow? Kamat, same word, sangat, by that sangha, from that sangha, it's in the ablative. Then kamat, from that kama. Kama means? Huh? Yeah, why are you whispering at me? Okay, keep it together, dude. From that kama, from that desire. Kamat kroda abhijayate. Kroda is a new word. What's kroda mean? Look at it. Anger. There you go. Kroda means anger. So, sometimes we talk about kam, krodha, and lobh, lust, anger, and greed as the narak dvar, the gates to hell. The Gita calls them narak dvar. But here they're not just being listed as a list of things. There's a chronology. There's a chronology. Lobh, greed, is usually greed for things. Kam is desire for people. You want to enjoy things, you want to enjoy people. So here we have dhyayata vishayang pungsa. A person contemplates, meditates on vishaya, on sense objects. And then sangatesho pajayate. From that contemplation comes attachment. Sangat sanjayate kama. From that attachment comes desire. Kamat krodha abhijayate. From that desire comes anger. Why does anger come from desire? Why does anger come from desire? Yes, Mason.
Because if you don't have the thing you're lusting after, you get irritated, angry.
Because you don't get it, and now you're angry. Any other answers?
You get it and you're angry.
Why would you get something and be angry?
It's disappointing. It wasn't as good as you thought it was.
It's never as good as you thought it would be. That's the grass is always greener phenomena. Your expectation always exceeds your experience. But let's imagine for a moment that your expectation does not exceed your experience. Let's say the thing you got was even better than you expected. How could that lead to anger? Then that would be fear, wouldn't it? That'd be fear of loss. You could lose it, but you don't necessarily lose it. You have a fear. Why will you necessarily lose it?
Because you'll die eventually.
Because everything in the material world is temporary. So you got three scenarios. A, you don't get it. What are you going to get if you don't get it? You're going to get angry, frustrated, right? Okay. Let's say you get it and it doesn't live up to its expectations. What are you going to be? Disappointed, which is another way of saying frustrated, which is another way of saying angry. You got it? Okay. Now let's say you get it and it lives up to your expectations. What's eventually going to happen in due course of time? It's going to go away. Then what are you going to be? Disappointed. It's another way of saying angry. You follow? Kamat krodha abhijayate. Krodhat. What's krodha mean? Angry. Krodhat. What does that mean? From the anger. Remember? Sangat. From the attachment. comes desire. From the desire comes anger. From the anger, krodhat, bhavan sammoha, bhavati sammoha. From that anger you become, he becomes, she becomes. Bhavati means he is, she is. Sammoha. Sammoha means bewilderment. From mu. Mu means confused. You become confused. Sammoha means you become completely confused. Why do you become confused when you get angry?
You got what you wanted and
No. Yeah?
You lose your regulative.
Yeah, that happens later. You become confused because anger is such a hot, experienced emotion that you begin to act rashly. And you stop thinking critically and dispassionately. This is proven. This is demonstrated. Past a certain level of stimulation, you start to make poor decisions and you act rashly. Don't you all have experience of this in your life? That you get angry and make bad decisions? You get clouded. The anger clouds your judgment. You become reactive. Isn't it? Krodhat bhavati sammoha. Sammoha again means confusion, bewilderment. Sammohat. What does sammohat mean? From that confusion. You decline nouns in Sanskrit and it turns them into prepositional phrases. Mandiram, I'm going to the temple. Or Krishnam, I'm going to Krishna. Krishnena, I'm with Krishna. Krishnaya, I'm doing this for Krishna. Krishnat, from Krishna. Krishnasya, of Krishna. Krishne, in Krishna. And so you can take the noun and you can decline it in various ways and it occupies a different place in a sentence. So this is the ablative. The ablative means from this comes this, from this comes this. So it's a chronology. From your contemplation comes attachment. From your attachment comes desire. From your desire comes anger. From your anger becomes bewilderment. And then sammohat, from that bewilderment. Smriti vibhramaha. You lose your remembrance. Smriti vibhramaha. Your memory becomes disturbed, broken. What does that mean, your memory becomes broken? Smriti, or remembrance in Sanskrit, is synonymous with all the good lessons you've learned in your life which you remember in your time of need. Smriti, in essence, is the precursor of intelligence because it represents all of the good lessons you've learned in life, all the teachings you've learned in life, that you now have as a repository of knowledge that you can call up whenever you need it. And so good memory means you've learned your lessons well and you've had good teachers, they've taught you well, and now you are in possession of a repository of memories which you then use to navigate the world. You follow? So now you're angry, you're hot, you get confused, you can't think clearly, you're too hot, you're seeing red. And from that you forget all the valuable lessons you've learned in life, such as how to stay aloof from too much attachment to sense objects, such as how to, it's like the sunken cost fallacy. You start to make mistakes, you start to make errors in your judgment. You start to become overly optimistic or overly negative or overly attached, and you start to become desperate and you start to make desperate moves and reactive moves and poorly thought out moves and angry moves. Don't you all have experience of this? And then smriti vibhramaha. You no longer have access to all the good things you've learned. Smriti brahmshat buddhinasha. From that bewilderment of memory comes the destruction of intelligence. Because really your memories are what, when you use your memories, that's intelligence. The memories are the precursor of intelligence because it's the repository of memories that gives you access to a body of knowledge, like an encyclopedia in your head. When you lose that, you no longer have anything to work with through your intelligence, and therefore the destruction of the precursor, the foundation of intelligence. Intelligence is the active usage of those memories, and now once you've lost those memories, you've lost your ability to think through things carefully. Buddhinasha. Buddhinashat pranashati. And once you lose that, you're lost. Pranashati. He is lost. He's destroyed. This is the anatomy of a fall down. The anatomy of breaking your vows. The anatomy of losing what's most valuable for what's least valuable. The anatomy of ruining your life, at least temporarily. Because that works. You follow? You see that boy, he's at your work. You don't think he's that cute, but like whatever. You see that boy hanging out, whatever. You get a little attached. He always brings you your decaffeinated coffee. And then, you know, there's a little bit of attachment there. You enjoy talking to him. Then all of a sudden he starts to look more attractive to you and you want to go out on a date. And then he doesn't ask you out and you start to hate him because he dates the other person. Or he does ask you out and he turns out to be a jerk and now you're all bummed as well. Or he asks you out and you guys have a life together and then he dies. Or you die, or you get old, or the thrill is gone. Now you're bitter and angry. And you just like, it clouds your thoughts. And you no longer have access to the good instructions you've received your whole life about how to be detached. And then you lose your intelligence. You can't navigate through that difficult time. And you become really bitter. And you end up, you know, just going out with the wrong people in retribution, or using drugs or alcohol, or getting angry at the temple because you met the person at the temple even though everyone was telling you not to date him at the temple. You see how this works? I find this to be brilliant, Krishna's analysis, perennial, as valuable today as it was thousands of years ago it was spoken, piercingly accurate. The anatomy of a fall down, which of course empowers you to look at things more carefully and stop it in its tracks, stop the movement. So it doesn't have that snowball effect of one thing after another. Amazingly, I mentioned how Krishna is able to elegantly continue his argument, but this also has the same exact structure of one thing leads to another. Remember when I was explaining this about elegance within teachings? It wasn't just accidental. It's completely relevant to understanding the flow of this, but in the negative direction. Again, building on this thing I mentioned of positive and negative themes. So Krishna amazingly is showing you this. He's like smoothly moving from sitting to moving, while also moving you through a living argument about how somebody falls down. And in many ways, this tells you how one of the senses can take away the mind of a person. So it's a commentary on what it means to sit and why the senses are so dangerous. At the same time, we're now moving into the topic of how to move in this world. Did you guys follow all that? It's slick. It's sophisticated. It's brilliant. Did you guys follow that? Krishna is smoothly moving us from the sitting to the walking portion. He's also giving you an analysis of exactly how your senses get ripped away, which is from the sitting portion. As he's doing that, he's moving you smoothly through the progression as it happens, mirroring his smooth argument with a sub-argument that's also smooth and shows you a progression, which then gives you the ability to interrupt that process and do a pattern interrupt and catch it and start to see it happening in your own life. And it gives you several strategic points at which to defend yourself, thus stopping that negative downward movement. While contemplating the object of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from the attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. From anger, complete delusion arises. And from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down in the material pool. We generally experience a loss of intelligence as being like, it's almost like a little bit redundant. Is this sammoha, confusion, and then smriti vibrama, the bewilderment of memory, and then buddhi nasha, the destruction of intelligence. Normally those things might seem redundant. Of course, then there would be a fault in Krishna's chronology. So we have to rescue Krishna from that perceived potential fault in his chronology. But just imagine for a moment that you start to become hot and disturbed, and you stop yourself and go, whoa, I need to remember the good lessons I've learned. You follow? You could stop it at the sammoha. You're hot, you're confused, but you stop and you withdraw and you reflect on the good lessons you've learned in life. Right? Could that work? Sure. Now you can't remember the good lessons, and now you can't think through things carefully, and you just like you actually can't. You start to think about stuff. You just think about stuff all wrong. Now your memories become bewildered. Right? You can stop yourself and say, "Whoa, I can't think about that. I got to withdraw here. I got to withdraw here. I can't make good decisions right now. Stop. I got to go back. Remember my good instructions. I got to go back and clear my head. I got to go back and not be so angry. I got to go back and not be so desirous." And you can start to unpack things and slow it down. You follow? So although these things seem to occur simultaneously, they're actually very small different steps. Just like you see the wrestler, it seems like he just dove at him and picked him up, but he didn't. He feinted, did a level change, penetration step, turned the corner and picked the guy up after he folded him. And you can break it down. And having this ability allows you to catch yourself at certain strategic points before all is lost. It's like redundancies or almost like, what do I want to say? Yeah, I mean, it's a military example. Fallback. I was thinking about a dam and where there's like different like locks or different, what do you call it? Like a seal, and like seal 1 breaks and seal 2 breaks and it kicks in, and there's like emergency measures that take place at each point. Fail safes. Thank you. There's different fail safes. That's exactly the word I was looking for. Fallback point is way sexier because you're a military man, so it like brings up the idea that we're in war and we're falling back to a point. But what I wanted to use, because I'm not from the military, is I want to use the term fail-safe. Sometimes you'll have multiple redundancies built in, and there'll be multiple fail-safes. That if this breaks, then this catches it, and if this breaks, then this catches it. These are fail-safes. And if you can correctly understand this, it'll help you to keep your head. Now, if we're going in the right direction and we've anticipated how Krishna's moving through his arguments and how he's segueing from sitting to moving and how he's giving us a chronology and there's this positive, negative, and the do's and do nots, what should we expect to come next? Huh? How to move, right? But a person free from all attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom can attain the complete mercy of the Lord. Raga, dvesha, vimuktais but, that's the contrasting conjunction. So when I'm switching from the negative to the positive, tu means but. But, raga, dvesha, vimuktai, by someone who's able to control, who's freed from rag and dvesh, attachment and aversion. Rag and dvesh. When I counsel couples, something people don't realize is the relationship is never equal. One person is always more attached than the other. And so, in the art of seduction, one person is attracted to the other person. And it's always more from one side than the other. And in a good romantic relationship, and honestly even in a good relationship, because seduction can be understood broadly speaking to just be attraction. And it can be romantic or platonic, and it spans the gap of eros and agape, no problem. And it refers to your relationships with your friend, your family, your business partners, and your romantic partners, everything. But sometimes the person gets too clingy and you're repulsed by them. Have you ever felt that before? That you're repulsed by a person that you're in a relationship with? That's just the game. There is no relationship you'll ever have that won't at some point involve some repulsion. If you're truly with the person, and there's some equality, some friendship. If you're always aspiring for the person, you never conquer them on any level, then you can always be just attracted because they're unobtainable. In the beginning with your guru, it's maryada, you're kept at a distance. At some point there's upanayanam, which is second initiation, where it means to bring close. Upaniti, you're brought close. You're brought close because you're mature enough that you won't become offensive, because familiarity can breed contempt. Sometimes you come close, you massage your guru, you serve them, you clean up for them after they use the bathroom or something like that, and then you start to think, oh, they're just an ordinary person. And you start to view them as being ordinary, and you lose sight of the valuable things they give you, and you start to lower them to your level, as if somehow or other you thought that they didn't defecate or urinate or you didn't have to sleep ever, and then you see them sleeping or they snore and you start to feel repulsed by them because you were so immature, you had some sort of fantasy conception of that they were some kind of cartoon figure or something like that. You follow? Hit that door for me, would you? Close that door for me, quick. But inevitably in life, you get attracted to things, and then you get repulsed by things, and oftentimes the same thing that attracts you eventually repulses you, and vice versa. If you operate based on attraction and repulsion, you'll never succeed. When I'm counseling, especially young couples, I say, oh, you're repulsed, right? They're repulsing you, right? And they're always, no. And I'm like, come on, be honest. And they're like, yeah. You just want to get away from them, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, that's normal. We're not allowed to say it, but it's normal. If you think you're never going to feel repulsion, and like the feeling of repulsion is the sign to cut and run, you're just a child. You can't take your attraction and repulsion that seriously. The problem is we take our attraction way too seriously, so we take our repulsion way too seriously. You shouldn't take your attraction or your repulsion particularly seriously. You should look for solid people with admirable qualities who have integrity that you can build a future with, who, have enough fine qualities that you can work with them on whatever level. If it's romantic, one of the fine qualities is their personal beauty. And you have enough of the relevant qualities to make the relationship work, and then expect to ride the attraction repulsion train for considerable, on a regular basis forever. I've been married 25 years. My wife gets too clingy, I get repulsed. Then she gets a little distant, I get attracted. I even know it's happening, and it still works. It's just a game. It's a good game. You should learn how to play that game. It's like it makes it easy. You got to learn how to attract people and how not to repulse people too much, and how to turn corners and how to pass the baton back and forth and trade off in the relationship. It's a game, and people want to be your friends and they want to be connected to you. And if you can play the game nicely, that makes it easier for them. Instead of always being a repulsive. You know what I mean? I mean, that sucks. Like, it's like, what do you want to? It's like your mother is like the only one who can love you. You're just a consistently repulsive human being. Bring your A game, learn the art, but even once you learn the art, there's always going to be some back and forth. Raga, dvesha, vimuktais too. But if you can grow up enough to get over that cheap attraction and aversion, rag and dvesha, attachment and aversion, which normally rules people's world, and they're just like a monkey. They're just like an animal. They're just completely controlled by this attachment and aversion. They have no ability. They have no ability. If it happens again, shut it down. They have no ability to just be a little transcendental, be a little stoic, be a little deep, be a little pensive, be a little thoughtful, and they just cut and run. Anytime they feel any type of aversion, they think that's a sign it's not meant to be. You following me? But if you can get free from that attachment aversion, Vishayan Indriyais Charan, and not act with your senses on their sense objects. Char means to move. That's like, how does he walk? So char means to move. Atma vashai vidheyatma. And you can, through atma vashai, through bringing the self under control, vidheyatma, by a regulated person. You're a regulated person who can bring the self under control. Prabhupada says, control his senses through the regulative principles of freedom. What a brilliant statement. Vimuktai means you're freed from attachment and aversion. Vimukta means you're freed. By being freed, through being a regulated person who practices self-restraint. Atma vashai, through self-restraint. Vidheyatma, a person who's governed by the rule of law. Vidhi means rule. A person who's got a regulated self, who's able to control themselves and bring themselves under control, and who's freed from attachment and aversion. Prabhupada puts it all together brilliantly and calls it the regulative principles of freedom. That by controlling yourself, you become free. Not by just chasing your tail like a dog. He is able to attain the complete mercy of the Lord. Prasadam adhigachati. he attains prasad. Now, prasad in Sanskrit means,
The offering.
I mean, we use the word all the time, so why don't you know what it means? Look at the translation. I mean, look at the translation, or you know the word. It's in your lexicon. What's wrong with you people? Mercy of the Lord. All right, that's the translation. Right? That's not what prasad means. Sad means to sink. Prasad means to become tranquil. That's the literal meaning of the term, to become peaceful. A secondary meaning of the term is something which is offered from the deity, which itself is like the supreme tranquility, and now that's called prasadam. It's a secondary meaning of the word, not based on its etymology, but it's just how it gets used sometimes in a religious context. But prasadam actually literally means you become tranquil. You achieve tranquility. But of course, if a Vaishnava sees prasadam adhigachati, you obtain prasadam, and you're just told to think of Krishna as the highest object, and that's how you're going to control yourself, then it's very natural to also see this as being you obtain mercy. You've qualified yourself for attaining mercy by following the regulative principles of freedom, by transcending mere attachment and aversion and living on a higher platform. You guys following this? All right. Let's stop it there. I mean, let's keep going. It gets really juicy right now. Let's keep going. Prasade. Within that prasad, sarva dukhanam, all the miseries of life, hanir, they are destroyed. Asya upajayate, the destruction of all the miseries of life is born. Just how like one thing, abhijayate, upajayate, sanjayate, this is born from this, this is born from this, this is born from this. Now, hanir asya upajayate, now the destruction of all your miseries is born in that prasadam. Prasanna chetasa hiyasau, very quickly you become happy. Buddhi paryavatishtate, and your intelligence becomes well established. Previously your intelligence was destroyed. Now your intelligence becomes established. It's the exact reversal of what happened previously. It's how you avoid the bad thing that happens. What do? You become free from merely acting on attachment and aversion. You control yourself through the regulative principles of freedom. You achieve tranquility, and in that tranquil state, the destruction of all your suffering is born. The death of all your suffering is born. It's very poetic. And you become happy quickly. And your intelligence is properly established, and you become a Sthita Pragya Muni, a sage of steady wisdom. Nasti buddhir ayuktasya. If you're not yoked, if you're not self-controlled, if you're not yogad, if you don't have me as the highest object, if you're not sitting with me as the highest object, if you don't follow this protocol of controlling yourself, nasti buddhi, there's no intelligence. Nacha ayuktasya bhavana, and there's no meditation. Nacha bhavayata shantir, and if you're not able to meditate and be contemplative, then you'll never become peaceful. Ashantasya kuta sukam, and where is the peace? Where is the happiness for one who's not peaceful? It's like, it's a reversal, right? And without this, you can't get this. Without this, you can't get this. Without this, you can't get this. And there's the same progression. But a person free from all attachment and aversion, able to control the senses through the regular principles of freedom, can attain the complete mercy of the Lord. For one that's satisfied, the threefold miseries of material existence no longer exist. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. One who's not connected with the Supreme can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there's no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? This importance of establishing your intelligence, establishing your wisdom, controlling yourself, to not get swept away. As a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. Therefore, one whose senses are restrained from their objects is certainly a steady intelligence. And Krishna wraps it all up brilliantly. What a treatment, right? What a brilliant, perennial, philosophical, theological, walk through life. What brilliant points, what valuable points are there. Thank you very much, IGTV. What amazing stuff. Such a